am in the National Results Operations Center here in Tshwane, and I've got my political analyst Khanyi Magubane with me in studio. And some of the interesting things that Griselda Khanyi has spoken about, obviously zooming in Gauteng. Of course, I've refreshed this. We now know that 38% of the votes have now been counted. And I want to zoom in on the Eastern Cape. They spent some time speaking about Gauteng. And let's just look at the numbers here in terms of the Eastern Cape. 47% of those, numbers being counted. And of course, it talks to you about the leading party here. We have the ANC, DA, EFF. These numbers, of course, are trickling in. Still not reflecting what we would historically have been seeing at this point.
Right.
Perhaps let's talk about, the day after voting, now that the numbers are trickling in. What have been your observations, Khanyi?
Well, I can tell you this much. It's certainly a very different picture than what it was at 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning when we were sitting at like 1% of the vote. And now what we are seeing is that, as the numbers trickle in, we're seeing, for instance, in the Eastern Cape there, when we look at the numbers, that the Eastern Cape still very much saying yes to the ANC as the numbers look so far. And we see the DA at a very far margin. I mean, 14% versus 67% of the votes says that, there's a very large margin in between, because we see the EFF, sitting at 7.6%. And so what we also then need to look at is what the next ANC administration in the Eastern Cape is going to look like. Will it get an outright majority enough for it not to need any coalitions? It looks like it. And we know that in the past they've had issues of their past mayors and people sitting in the executive, being voted out. We've had quite a high number of turnover of people sitting at the top. And so the discussion that the ANC needs to start having with itself as these numbers start trickling in is that, look, we are coming back into power, but let's not forget that we almost lost power, in the Eastern Cape. When the issue of Ethel Trollip, for instance, in the Nelson Mandela Bay was very hot and heavy, and the DA lost that metro, and they contested that loss very hard because they worked very hard, to win Nelson Mandela Bay. And so the question is, will it come back to them? It doesn't look like it. And that's a hard blow. But Mmusi Maimane is vindicated to a certain extent, because it was under him that the DA won so many metros, which they subsequently all lost over the period of 5 years leading up to these elections. So the question is, who's the real biggest loser here? We don't know yet. We can't outrightly say the DA is lost or the EFF is lost. The picture may continue to change. And as we saw in the Western Cape, Good Party was sitting at number 5. By the time we knocked off at 5 a.m., they had jumped to number 3.
Yeah.
So we don't know what kind of jumps could still happen at this stage. I don't think the DA or the EFF need to breathe easy. Neither do I think the ANC could breathe easy, because their, saving grace is that the Action SA has not really penetrated the Eastern Cape as much as it has Gauteng, where we've seen it taking even some wards from the ANC.
Yeah.
So Eastern Cape, while, we don't want to call it yet, but looking very strong in the ANC's favor.
I mean, you talk about who the biggest winners, who the biggest losers are, and I'd like to just bring in this thought. Perhaps South Africa has been the biggest loser. Well, it is live television, so sorry about that, speaker. Did give me quite a fright there. But perhaps South Africa, just talking about these elections, is probably the biggest loser, because if you look at the turnout of voters, the IEC obviously having their press briefing not too long ago saying about 12 million of the 26.2 million people who had registered to vote actually turned up to the polls, and that is concerning, and it's telling us something. Perhaps let's talk about that. What are these low numbers telling us? Is it a low turnout of voters? Yes, of course it is, but is it a strategic move by South Africans to say, we will not come and vote as our democratic right, as opposed to saying, it is my democratic right to vote, and therefore I will show you that I want change.
You know, I just looked at the screen and I saw the time that it's about 3:30. And exactly at this time yesterday, I was sitting at our sister station, Ukhozi FM, doing an interview. And at that time, it was at 3 million voters who had voted. And what we're seeing is just a slight shift to 8%.
Yeah.
Just over 8 million votes, you know, were declared, you know, at the close of voting time. So what does it mean? You know, we've called it voter apathy.
Yeah.
But we've also called it an upset voter. You know, let's not forget that load shedding was just around the corner and we're still reeling from that. In previous years, you know, this is the time where government would try to behave.
Yes. Can you hold that thought?
Yeah.
As we have already told you, we are speaking to our various reporters who are across the country. Let's now go to our reporter in Ekurhuleni, Mahlaku Komane. Mahlaku, what's happening where you are in Ekurhuleni?
Has been a predominantly strong ANC hold, but you know, yesterday we did see that there were those voters that just decided that they just were not going to come, you know, not going to go out and vote. I'm actually joined by a resident here that I just stopped, and I'm just going to ask her because she said, I understand that she didn't vote yesterday, so just going to ask her why she decided not to vote. Siswami njani? Ngicela ungitshele ukuthi uthe wena zange uvote izolo kwenzakaleni?
Angivotanga sisi izolo because kuyafana angisiboni isidingo sokuthi sivote silulutsha sihleli apha phansi asisebenzi ayikho into esingayizamiyo ama-RDP kuyabhaliswa ayikho into ephumayo so uzothi mawuvota uthi uvotela ukuthi kwenzakaleni uzothi uvotelani because kuyafana there will be no change bazobuyela abantu baphinde bazofuna ivote next year bazositshela ukuthi kuzoba khona ushintsho of which alukho. Uyangi-understand siswami so kubuhlungu ukuthi thina silulutsha because iminyaka iyahamba siyakhula and akubonakali nix bathi qala ibhizinisi phansi uyiqala ngani ngiyimi ngihlala emqashweni ngiqala ngani ngiqala kanjani.
You've heard the Unati, this resident just telling us that the reason that she didn't go and vote, she didn't see a reason why she should go and vote because nothing's going to change. Also saying that, I suppose tired of the promises, saying that, you know, whether it is, you know, registering for an RDP house or being told that she should go and start a business. How does she start a business? With what? It requires capital to start a business, saying that it's really a sad picture for them as a youth in this particular part of the province, saying that for her, really there is no use to go to there was no use yesterday to go and turn up at those voting stations. So this is the many of those millions that didn't show up. I heard that you'd said with Ms. Magubane that about 8 million voters or so turned up by the close of business yesterday or voting, and I suppose she's the missing, those few millions that are missing, and these are just some of the reasons that you get. But I'm also joined by people that also stay in Ekurhuleni. Mr. Skosana here, he went out and he voted. He's got his reasons. Let's talk to him and find out. Baba, when uthe uhambile kimi izolo uyovota yini kwenza ukuthi uphume uhambe uyovota?
Mina ngiphumela ukuthi ngiyovota for recite lama disable.
Unfortunately, we've lost audio there, you know, from our reporter, Mahlaku. Interestingly, she's speaking to somebody who has decided not to vote and also somebody who has voted. But we'll continue to speak to our analyst who is in studio with me, Khanyi Magubane, and also go to our reporters who are on various parts of the country. Stay with the SABC News channel. I'll be right back.